Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Blurred Box. I'm Chloe.
I'm Pooja.
I'm Sophie.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Clifford.
And we're going to be continuing off our conversation from the college process that we touched back in one or two episodes past. We gave our personal insights as to the application process in the midst of COVID. And we're going to retackle that same conversation, but now with some professional help.
Today we have Dr. Adam Litz, Stanford OHS's head of college counseling. We brought him on the show in one of our earlier episodes for season 1, and today we are looking to get his perspective as a college counselor on applying during COVID-19. To start us off, how has your year been, Dr. Litz?
You know, like everyone else, it's been interesting. It's been different, you know, just in working with students. But, you know, honestly, like the day-to-day things that I do, because I work at an online high school, like it hasn't been all that, you know, different with my day-to-day. Now, everything going on around me has definitely changed things. But
would you say it's like been a good or bad year to be Dr. Lips?
it's always a great year to be.
Fair.
No, I
apologies.
mean, I like.
Sorry.
No, I mean, but honestly, like I'm really fortunate in that, you know, I work with a bunch of really impressive and motivated and interesting people. It makes my job a lot easier, you know, because I'm talking to students and talking about them to colleges. So, you know, in that way, it was really no different. You know, there were a couple new wrinkles that got thrown into it, but again, fundamentally, what I do, it was still pretty good.
Is it a bit far-fetched to ask what those wrinkles are?
Well, I think that you're pretty much aware of them, right? Like anything that you can think of that changed about college admissions. You know, the move to test optional, the inability to visit colleges. Those were kind of the wrinkles that we had to deal with, right? And have conversations about what that might mean for someone who's applying.
Yeah, so let's talk about that then. Like, what is the impact from your perspective on like how largely or how little has that impacted the process? Because honestly, from my perspective, the campus visits, that's maybe me just not living in the US, but like for me, that wasn't that big of a factor. I can just, this is going to sound really bad, go on Google Earth and just, you know, click that little button around campus and go, all right, I'm getting such a feel for, I don't know, for wherever I'm looking at, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, where do you want to start? I mean, I guess if you're looking for kind of a silver lining type situation, and one thing that the college that I think really improved on was because they couldn't take on visitors and couldn't do on-campus information sessions, you know, they were forced to put those things all online. So, you know, instead of, oh, I have to go to Boston, you know, and go to these 5 schools in order to see their info sessions, in one day, you could, from your bedroom, you know, do a college visit info session at a school in Boston, one in Chicago, one in LA, one in Miami. You could do that all in one day. That wasn't anything that people could ever do before. And it's sort of like what took you so long to, you know, kind of get out there and, you know, be able to make it more widely available to people. So I think that was in the kind of research department, that was a good outcome of this. And I hope it's something that they continue, you know, going forward.
I know I've personally I'm a junior, so I've personally been looking at all these virtual info sessions, and they've been really helpful. And I didn't expect it to be this easy online. Like I thought I had to go and travel. So I really appreciated the change. I had a quick question though. Like in addition to like using these resources like virtual info sessions, like how would you recommend the seniors and also for me juniors to navigate this kind of climate when everything's coming in virtual and you can't really visit campus, and also like how to navigate the test optional space?
Yeah, sure. Well, before we do that, I want to get to Andrew's facial expression on when you said those have been really helpful. He gave a
Sure, yeah.
like a sideways look.
Yeah, I was doing all of these virtual info sessions last year. I'm a senior now. And for me, I mean, they were good. And like, there was definitely some valuable information in there. But also like for me, a lot of the schools that I was looking at, it was almost verbatim the same things at a lot of these schools of like, we have a holistic admissions process. I heard the word holistic too many times. And like, here's like, we have the most clubs and activities and we have something for you. And so for me, like, I don't know how different that would be if you're actually visiting the schools, but I think at least if you get to walk around, you sort of hopefully can at least get some semblance of a vibe, for lack of better word. So I thought that was sort of a disappointment to me.
You forgot to mention the big school feel and small school resources, and the study abroad opportunities as well. But I mean, I think you're right. Like, it doesn't really change. They don't change that much from place to place, and you do miss out on walking around. But I mean, there are sometimes, some differences, in there between them, and then you can get a feel. I think a little bit. You can read the person and the way that they conduct their admission process, and get a sense for that. And then, Sophie, so you're looking for kind of advice and things, right, for a younger student. I mean, I think you have to take and use what's available to you. So, I mean, I think the info sessions are good, first of all, just to get a lay of the land and see kind of what the expectations are. I think listening to questions in those sessions can be really helpful and insightful, because one, you can see how the admission officer answers the questions, then you can see what kind of questions people are asking. And then what I really encourage people to do is your list starts to focus a little bit more, and you can really understand and know what kinds of things you're looking for, to really kind of drill down into the school. So if you're really interested in chemical engineering, like, explore that department a little bit. College websites are notoriously bad, but I think if you have an interest in a subject area, you can go into a department, you can see who the faculty are, what they're teaching, what their research interests are, and then maybe even contact them if you're more of an academic focused student. If you're more interested in the social life and things of a place, you can talk to students who are at the school. So I think, like, really doing careful and thorough research with what's available to you is kind of the best thing to do, which sounds obvious. Most of the things I say sound obvious, and I'm pretty sorry.
Can I ask something that you might not have such an obvious answer to? I think sort of the big wrinkle from this year, I think, and moving into the future too, is going test optional at a lot of these schools. And so, I mean, to me, it felt like something that sort of was a while in the making, and COVID really accelerated. But I was wondering how you feel about that for this year, for the future, how you think it changes the landscape. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, so I like, my bias is like, I'm for less testing, not more testing. We don't need to, like, relitigate the history of the standardized testing, and then even what standardized testing means, how it's been used, and all those kind of things. So I like that places have gone test optional. I think it's probably overall, like, in general, like, overall, it's more fair, actually, even though tests are supposed to be standardized and supposed to be fair. So I like that. I think it gives colleges the opportunity to, take maybe more chances on some students who they wouldn't have otherwise. I don't know, like, what the future of it's going to be. I don't know if everyone's going to stick with it. I think that tests are probably still going to continue to play a role, because you have, sorry, I'm talking a lot, but you have all these forces at work, like the College Board, which is like a huge, massive force, and then the colleges. But then you also have, like, really important schools and systems like the University of California saying that we're not going to use tests anymore. And I think that's important. So it'll be something that'll be interesting and to pay attention to. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not a direct answer. And then it's also all speculation too, because I don't know.
I just had a quick question about, like, well, two questions. So one of the questions was, there's been a huge rise in applications from what I heard, compared to previous years. And so my first question was with regards to whether you think there's a correlation between that and it being test optional, and I guess how that will be, like, how that will affect, like, the admissions process this year, or, like, who gets admitted, if that changes because of the test optional.
Sure. I mean, and so first of all, I'll say, I mean, all of the decisions haven't come back yet, right? So we're still sort of sorting through everything. We're still waiting for, for quite a few to come back, and then we'll figure it out. Yes, the colleges have told us their application numbers are up. I think it's likely due in part to the test optional situation. So while someone may have in the past tested and felt like, oh, I'm in the lower 25% at all these schools, like I might as well not apply. Now they're still presenting with great grades, good activities, engaged and all this kind of stuff, and they're going to give it a shot. So maybe that's part of it. And then I think that application numbers also go up when uncertainty goes up, because people are trying to cover more area and try to give themselves more options in that way.
Okay. Yeah. And then I'll let Clifford go if he has a question. He can
also, if I don't answer the question, just like, because sometimes I start talking, I'm old, right? So I start talking,
it's good.
And then I like get off track of what was done. I gotta try to tighten up my answers a little bit. You can.
No, we're good. We're having conversation. It's all relax. Cool. It's a chill, relaxed space.
As a junior, I'm actually enjoying hearing all of your thoughts.
Yeah. Okay.
Clifford, you better ask your question before it goes away.
Because what you're saying reminded me of something I actually heard in an info session. It was more just a general comment, but it was basically making like a comparison between like the toppings on a pizza and like constructing your application, basically saying sort of basically this test optional thing that, the way things are moving, it's more about kind of constructing like your kind of pizza of your application, like with the toppings being, different parts. One of them's the tests, which now you can either put on there or not put on there, and your various extracurriculars. I mean, in the past, applications has been very much focused on, checking those boxes, and you have to have your test, you have to have all these variety of things. But I mean, with the test optional movement, I mean, do you think that applications are moving to a space where it's more about kind of constructing a story and less about checking boxes, and there's going to be kind of more freedom for students to kind of construct their own narrative for colleges?
So I think yes. I think it hasn't, and so this is the college admission people will tell you, like it hasn't fundamentally changed, right? That's what they probably keep saying to you, or you hear something along those lines. It's actually always been about the description that you used of creating a story, creating a narrative, and then presenting aspects of yourself and your personality. So in that regard, things don't really change that much. It's just that when you add the tests in as a required portion of the application, I don't even know if I'm going to articulate this right. Well, when you add the tests in as part of the application, and then you think about how much colleges have, especially in the past like 30, 40 years, been concerned about their rankings and their ratings and their selectivity and all those kind of things. And that being a direct like indicator of that, so they had to pay attention to it as a thing, whereas, and then there were probably students who, because their test score, quite frankly, wasn't measuring up to what they had come to expect from applicants and what else is in their applicant pool, there are situations where that student wouldn't be admitted. But when we remove that, you can still send your great and amazing narrative, that doesn't become a negative anymore, and then you could be admitted. So in summary, I'm not really, does that make sense? I'm just trying to work through it right now. Sorry. To explain, to explain, I think that it's just like, if you have a test score and it's good, however you deem that to be, you should stick it on your application to demonstrate that you have that good test score. And then it will maybe help you or be a benefit to you. But without it, it doesn't mean you can't be admitted.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Yeah,
think
that
so.
makes sense.
In a summary,
Yeah.
we got it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we can take pieces and we'll put it together.
But I mean, I also think, I mean, along the lines of test scores, I think that there are different expectations from different people. You know, if I'm being completely honest, like if you're from a well-resourced area, school, you know, place with a high college going population, you know, there's probably going to be almost, even in a test optional situation, there's probably, the colleges won't say this, but I think there's going to be the expectation of a test. And there's going to be expectation of an exam that is in what they would consider to be high or upper 25%. You know, that's how it's probably going to be. And if you're from a less resourced area or places where tests are historically not high, that's not going to probably be an expectation for you. And from my perspective, that is a good thing in the sense that then the test does not become a barrier for those students.
Yet there's still that expectation for those that, like, if you're, like you said, the first option that you have
Yes.
a high going college population, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't fulfill that, then is that kind of like, you know, brownie points off of your application, right? Is that kind of what's being implied, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. So I also will agree with admission people. Like people roll their eyes when they're like, oh, it's the office of admission, not the office of denial or whatever. You know, that, like one of those admission jokes that you know, when you go to the session, like six
I've
people.
never heard it, but it sounds good.
Wait, you've never heard him say that, Andrew?
No, I've never heard it either.
We're the office of admission, not the office of rejection. Ho, ho, ho. Like that, right? Like, okay. So, I mean, I don't think that but I honestly don't think they're looking to ding people, right? Like the application, that's why I kind of like push back on students when they say, oh, I got rejected. Like nobody rejected you from the school. Like rejecting you sounds like, oh, I see this, like that's terrible, right? I'm gonna throw it away. That's like a rejection. You were just not offered admission, which I would say is denied. I think the language kind of matters. Like, and I don't think that people get dinged necessarily, except in the really, really uber highly selective pools. I don't think that you're getting like points off. I just think that you're maybe not adding to your profile, or I don't even know the word to use, like your potential candidacy or whatever.
Yeah, it makes sense. I get what you mean from that. I wanted to ask actually, you know how everything now is a different era. We're in online virtual learning for everyone. It's not just OHS. How do you think, if like anything else, these schools, or I mean schools as in the universities, they look at us differently? Or like, let's say for example, OHS, right? We're always online. Do they have a better or worse perspective of everyone else in comparison to before, now that, you know, everyone's moved on to online? There's been cases of like, you know, last year our seniors were like, give us pass fail all grades in senior year. Other schools, I don't know how they're faring. Andrew, Clifford, you guys can probably give input to how Trinity is.
I was about to say, like, our second semester junior year grades, which are like generally pretty important grades, were all pass fail, and so like I think that's a pretty big change.
Yeah, they did the regular grading system this year, though, because I think the idea was they sort of worked out, you know, the difficulties of last year and a smoother process now.
So, okay. So how did your college counselors kind of like advise you through that? And then I guess Dr. Lips can give his perspective on how he might have a different
why didn't you talk to their college? Like, they have good college counselors.
We told you, you were our last resort. We had to bring you on.
I got it.
Yeah, I mean, the advice that I got essentially was like, you have your grades and like they are what they are at that point, and like make sure you pass. And like also junior year, like I was trying to have teachers write good recommendations for me. And so like stay attentive. And also like, I mean, I'm sort of a nerd, so I was paying attention anyway. But like in this year too, which was I think when we came off of pass fail and back to regular grading, of like now these grades are extra important too. So that was sort of the advice that I received.
Yeah, I wasn't really speaking directly with my college counselor since that was just my sophomore year. But my personal attitude was that, you know, I still do want to make a good impression on these teachers, and And also, for the most part, I was like interested in the course material, so I wanted to work for that reason. But yeah, I viewed it as positive because I mean, there were some assignments I would have liked to do, and it was kind of a sort of random cutoff. But overall, it felt like the best thing for the situation.
I mean, I think everything, and again, this is another thing that the colleges will say over it. Everything is viewed in context, So if you've heard that before, yeah.
Yes, that one I've heard.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, another thing that they say a lot, but another thing that is completely true, which makes this thing, which people often want to do. Well, I did this. How is my performance or my GPA or my grades going to be looked at compared to the public school kid down the street or the kid that goes to the Catholic school across town? You know what I mean? And I just want to say, like, it doesn't work that way. It's the colleges will look at your situation, see what was available to you and what was offered to you, and then make a determination if it's if you're meeting whatever like criterion that they want. I mean, I think that for OHS, specifically, if we're talking about our school, and this goes for Trinity as well, it's like it's very difficult to graduate from these schools and not be well prepared to be a great college student. Okay, and sort of that's the bar that we want to make sure that the colleges want to make sure that people are clearing. Okay, and and the vast majority of people who graduate from our school, from your school, are going to clear that bar. And people are not being admitted unless they're applying to like a really specific program or, maybe in another country. They're not being admitted on like just the strength of their academic program. It's sort of like, it's reviewed. We look at your program and maybe in the past looked at test scores or not, right? And we say, oh, great student, can do well here, right? Like that box is checked. Now let's look at the rest of it. And then further, let's look at the rest of our applicant pool. And then this factor, that factor. And that's where the decision is made, And so I think that like OHS is we've been around long enough and sent hundreds of applications to all of these, places that it's a known quantity like many other places. And yeah. So okay. I don't think it's like an advantage to have been someplace that's online and I don't think that there's concern even, for like, I know the public school down here, it basically like just kind of shut down, and then it was pass fail. People weren't even doing it. It wasn't totally shut down.
Okay.
Okay. But they it's like it did shut down for a little, like everything closed for a while. And then they're like, okay, we're going to go back to virtual. And then like the virtual learning, because it's a big, massive public school, they're not as nimble as like these private schools and places. But I don't think colleges were like, oh, I'm like really concerned about the learning that the student did, because they have like a history of grades and then they were going to see senior year grades anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really sure how much it would have changed things.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say was, I guess, a couple of the biggest concerns that students this year had, like current seniors had, when applying to colleges versus previous years without the pandemic?
I think that people were a little bit more, maybe like humble and less self-assured in their approach. So, okay. They were more willing to listen to advice from us about, hey, we really think you need to find places where we're sure you're going to get in and that you really like, and invested in doing research in that way, because they finally, like, it's always been an uncertain process, right?
Yeah.
Where, especially when we get into when we get into the really selected places, like anything can happen. Right, you could get into one and not, 5 others, or whatever. But now like people are finally getting it, like, oh yeah, this is going to be really uncertain, and they're wondering about, well, do people take gap years, and is there going to be more or less room for me, and like, what do the past things mean, and all that. So I mean, I think that was one big thing, and the students I worked with did a good job, as good this year as they've ever done, you know, in any year. I think in part because of that.
Yeah, makes sense. Sophie, did you have a question before?
I think it was actually quite similar to what you discussed. So I don't know, I've been hearing a lot that this year and also next year, since a lot of schools are continuing to be test optional, that the application numbers will raise and continue to do so, and in turn be harder to get in. At least that's what I've been hearing. So I know a lot of people saying it's a bad time to be an applicant. I kind of want to just get your thoughts on it. I know you already briefly covered it, and then maybe if you have any insight, or like for me personally, like how do colleges navigate this? Like how do they narrow down their applicant pool? Like what are they looking for? And more on how do we kind of get through it? Like it's kind of a lot of pressure on us as we're going into college. Like, do we just continue doing what we're doing, or do we take a step back? Do we, I don't know, look for other options? Just general advice.
Sure. I mean, to answer the question, is it a bad time to be an applicant? I mean, I wouldn't say that. I don't think it's ever really a bad time. I mean, ideally, and this again, something you hear, I mean, this should be like an exciting, you know, kind of thing. Like you've probably all known for a long time that you're going to go to college. Like it's going to eventually happen. You're going to be living somewhere the next year. You know, with other people, you know, it has the potential to be really, really great, you know, so it should always be exciting. I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of things will depend on, you know, who you are, where you're applying, and, you know, all that as to like how difficult it's going to be or not. I mean, I think the one major, like two big pieces of advice that I have for people. One is that like, I know it can be difficult, but really work to avoid attaching your self-worth and like what defines you to the places where you've gotten into college. Like if you really truly knew like how asinine the whole process is, like you would be slapping yourself in the face because you were like, oh, I thought it meant so much that I would, like, I let the fact that I like got into this place say that I'm this kind of person, or the fact that I didn't get into these places say something negative about me. It's sad, you know, in a lot of ways. I understand why people do it and how we get to that point, but I think just resisting and avoiding the temptation to do that. And then, you know, the other thing too is having a little bit of humility and understanding, you know, that there are like great and amazing opportunities for you at a much wider variety of places than you may give credit for. Like if you just, you know, if you think about like what it takes, say, to be a college professor, and the fact that those jobs are so scarce and so difficult to come by, and you know, the fact that the people who are teaching you in college, regardless if you go to Princeton or if you go to like, you know, if you go to Kenyon or you go to Augustana College in Illinois, like those are PhDs and people who are experts in their field who are teaching you. So I mean, I think that really digging in and doing research on places that you may not be as familiar with, and then really like arriving at a place of appreciation and understanding of how that could be a great place for you, you know? So like, for example, like example is I'll tell people, you know, I'll have my first meeting with them and I'll say like, what are you thinking about? Right. And then inevitably they'll go to really selected places, which I totally would encourage them to do. And they're like, I really like, I like really want to go to Columbia. Like that's my number one choice, you know? And then I'll say why, and then they'll tell me. And then I say, all right, so you're applying to Columbia, right? And the application opens up in August. Like we know that that's happening. Okay. So just take that and put it to the side and just know that you're going to be doing that application. Don't go grinding on like reading more about Columbia when you already know that you love it and you're going to apply, right? It's a waste of time. You know, spend your time, effort, and energy talking to people about like, oh, what other places do what Columbia does well and that you found attractive. but that aren't so asinine in terms of like their process and how difficult it is to be admitted. And then like really picture yourself there maybe and find some that we know you'll get into, and then, you know, try to get to a place where you're happy with that. But you know, those are like two, I mean, I have that conversation, I guess, with a lot of people, but.
No, I'm glad you talked about that and that you made those 2 points, because it kind of reiterates what we as a group were talking about, well, minus Clifford, but what we as a group were talking about in episode 9, like plug to go see that. But a lot of the things Dr. Lips just mentioned is a lot of the things that we reiterated or we came to the conclusion of through our own personal experience, our own personal insights, talking about, like, you know, right after the whole process, to use Andrew's term, it's all hogwash, right? To be like thinking of your success as like, you know, getting in here, that's me, like this is what success is. We made a little comparison between society's outlook and mainly how it's society's outlook of how they define success, and imposing that on the students versus actually taking it into context, which is a lot of good things that Dr. Lips just mentioned. So thank you for defending our conclusions and showing we weren't talking, you know, a whole bunch of hogwash.
No, I think you're right. I mean, and I don't think it'll feel random at times. Like people say it's random.
It does, yeah. It's a little lottery. It feels that way.
It's not random. If you talk to the college, it's very purposeful in what they do. But you know, your N, right, is very small. Like for parents, their N is like 1, right? It's their kid.
Yeah.
Their child, right? Their student. For you, it's like yourself, and then like some of the people in your immediate circle. Okay. For a person in a college admission office, it's like tens of thousands of people. Like you have no idea what it's like to you know, work through that. And like I am working on this like imperfect analogy, you know, with to try to help people understand it. So it's like and it's a little bit materialistic, so tell me if it like maybe it doesn't work. Okay, so you're a person, right? And someone comes to you, and then they park like 10 luxury vehicles like in front of your house, right? Like top of the line, like everything, like a Tesla and a Mercedes, blah blah blah, all down the line, right?
Okay.
And they tell you that you can pick one, and then you can have it, right? So you're going to go through, right? You have something in your mind, like what you like, what you want to drive, you know, like maybe it's comfort, maybe it's speed, whatever, you know, so you're going to pick one. Okay.
Yeah.
And you picked it because that was like the one that spoke to you, right? That's the one that you wanted. And then someone's going to go to you and say, why didn't you pick like the Mercedes? Like, what was wrong with that? You know? And it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with it. It's great. It's like objectively amazing, but I could only pick one, you know? And that's kind of like how it will work for the people. Like it's an embarrassment of riches in some of these offices, you know, of just like great kids. So,
but then does that mean that each admission officer has like, because that's implying, you know, everyone has their own kind of like preference, right? So it's up to that specific admissions officer whether that student speaks to that admissions officer versus
you're the
other
admission
one.
Office. You're not the person picking the car is not one.
Oh, okay. So it's not one. All right, that's good. That's something to clear up, right?
Yes, like they talk and say like this is what we're valuing, and this is what we're looking for, you know, as a group. You don't ever know what that is. This is why it feels random, you know.
Gotcha. Okay.
And this is why, you know, we get to the point where like in my day, like there was a clear pecking order, right? So if you got into like these really selective schools, then every school that was less selective, you were also admitted to. Okay. Now you'll hear about a kid, sorry, I keep saying kid, that's so like long, but you'll hear about a student who, this student got into Yale, you know, so obviously they would get into like George Washington, and they would get into Northwestern and Vanderbilt, but their decisions are going to be like all over the place, you know? So just because there's this selectivity, there's not this necessarily this pecking order. It's the places finding the students that they, you know, that they're going to match best with. So it's out of your hands, really. All you can do is the best work you can possibly do on your application, and represent yourself in the best way, you know, building the best pizza, to talk about like to the earlier thing.
Yeah.
And then just hope for the best. you know, at that point. So
I mean, if college admissions are trying to find the best fit, then you know that if you get accepted to somewhere, it gives me some comfort to think about that. It's like if you get accepted to somewhere, like it's most likely going to be a good fit if you decide to go there, and I like it.
I also know, I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to chime in because Chloe sounded skeptical. I thought your car analogy was really good. And helpful.
oh, thank you.
Sorry.
I
Okay.
think I said it's like a tad, I feel it's like a tad like materialistic or something. So maybe there's, if you can think of something else I could use.
But it felt accurate at least.
Yeah, I feel like
I get what you mean.
that's what society thinks. It's about materialistic ideals rather than the holistic or personal approach. So I thought it was a good one.
Yeah.
I think I have like one last question, if that's okay.
No, yeah, shoot.
Because I mean, I'm just wondering, because I mean, obviously the colleges look at each student from, you know, an individual perspective, and they have, you know, general idea of the type of student that would fit that school. But another thing I always hear about is, you know, constructing a class and kind of like not necessarily evaluating each student by the same standards, but kind of evaluating the whole pool of students as like the pool that will be the class, meaning you want sort of different kinds of students. So how do you think that factors into like that decision?
I mean, I think it's huge and it's everything. And it's another area in which the student has no control over it. You know, a student has no control over institutional priorities. You know, the institution, like I said, they meet and connect before the admission season, and they decide, you know, what kind of things they're looking for in their incoming class. And then you may be great and amazing and would by all measures be an amazing student there, but given the applicant pool, it may not align with what they're looking for. So I think that's important, and that's sort of where there's this. They're never going to tell you exactly what that is, or, you know, and they're not going to know what that looks like until their applicant pool comes in. And this is part of why it feels, you know, random, like I said. But.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Dr. Lips, for coming on the second time. Just to let you know, everyone really loved you the first time you came on. So you're basically our most popular guest. So hopefully you enjoyed being here as much as we did. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is great. Like, thanks for listening to me, you know, go on and on. But
ramble.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm happy to talk about this stuff anytime.
No, yeah, we found it very helpful. We hope you answered a bunch of questions that we had, and hopefully they prove helpful to those of you listening. Yeah, thank you guys for listening to Blurred Box with Andrew, Chloe, Clifford, Pooja, and Sophie.
If you like our show and want to know more, check us out on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or please leave us a review on iTunes.
And be sure to join us in 2 weeks for another episode of Blurred Box, as we'll be releasing every other Sunday.
We would love to hear your feedback, suggestions, and questions, which you can email to blurredbox88@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at blurredbox for the latest updates.
And shout out to our audio and video editors, Moshe Kraus and Jiayun Zhang. We hope this episode was as productive for you guys as it was for us. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.